Hello everyone, welcome once again to my YouTube channel. Today we'll be looking at how to import a CSV file into an SQLITE3 database using Python. Now let's take note, SQLITE3 database is just like any other database, MySQL, PostgreSQL, Microsoft database and so on. So here we're going to be importing a CSV file into this database, and all this is going to be done on a mobile phone. So to import a CSV file into an SQLite database, we use the word import SQLite3, then import CSV. We import these two libraries. Then the try is just a way to catch errors. So now we write the first comment, making a connection between SQLite database and Python program. So we connect to the SQLite database called practice.db. That is the name of the database. So after connecting to the database, for me, this prints out once the connection is successful. Now we create table. So you already have your data, your CSV file. Take note, a CSV file can be opened in an Excel sheet. So at least you can have a preview of what the data looks like. So you know the table, how the table looks like, and the columns you have to create. So now, having previewed the data, the CSV file already, so I already know the columns I'm to create. So I create the first column and I name it ID, and I make it the primary key, which should auto increment. Then the second column, I call it name, and the third column, I call it population. The first column is called ID, the second column is called name, and the third column is called population. The second column, I declare it to be text and it should not be null, and the third one is an integer and is not null. Then we create the cursor that is used to access your data. So after creating the cursor connection, we create our execute, what is going to execute the query. So don't forget the variable SQL query, this is it here, and that is the query to create table. So it's passed into this function execute, and the cursor goes into the query and make sure it is executed. And once it is executed, automatically the table is created with the following columns: ID, name, and population. So after we are done with creating the table, wherein we're going to import the CSV file, the next thing we do is we open the CSV file using the open, and the name of the file is city.csv. I'll put in the description, I'll put a link to the file. So we saved it in the variable called file. So now take note of this line of code. Skip the first row. Next, the function next, when you call it on this variable file, which is the open file, what it does, it skips the first row, because in the original data set, the first row contains the name of the column. So we don't want that name of column, so it should be skipped. So what we are going to have will now be only the rows with the details we want minus the header. So now, after doing that, we read our content. So when you call this CSV.reader on the open file, it reads everything into this content. Then we generate our SQL query. So we say insert into cities, name, population, values. Take note, the table that was created, ID, does it automatically. So once a record is put into the table, it gives it 1, 2, 3 automatically. So we don't need to put anything there. So what we are putting into the data, into the table, is name and population. So when we created this query, we say insert into cities. Don't forget that is the name of the table. The name of the table is cities. Then we say into the columns, name and population, we should input the values. So now we'll now import the content of the file. We use execute many on this query. comma, content. What is content? The opened file already. Here it is. This is the variable. You've already opened the CSV file and everything is inside this variable. So we are now saying execute many into this table, that is this query, insert into cities, the content, those CSV file content, put it into this insert records query, which, and the query means insert into cities table. So what this line of code is doing is the content, all the things in the CSV file, put it in the cities table. So the next thing we do, we display the record. So we say select all from cities. Now I said import pandas as PD because I want my result to come in table format. So that's what I did on this line of code here. So pd.dataframe puts your result into a table format, which is a data frame. So the fetch all goes in to the table and fetches all the records and puts it in the data frame, which is called rows. So we print out rows as the table format, and once we print it out, you will see our results once I run the code. Then we commit our changes to the database. If you don't call commit, it will not be affected. So the commit makes sure the changes to the database are affected. And what did we do? We created a table and we imputed data into that table. We imputed record into that table. So this commit makes sure it saves it. Everything is committed into the database. Now this except is for the error catching technique, that this try. So it tries this code, these queries, and make sure they are executed. If they are not executed, you say except, you call an error. So if this code doesn't run, what happens? It says failed to execute error. Then the finally block says we should check if there's an SQL connection. So if there's an SQL connection, please, this line of code now says close the connection. And once the connection is closed, you can now say print, it prints this and say SQLITE connection is closed. So what we are going to do now, we're going to run the code, this code or query, to see our results. So now I'm in my SQLITE database reader. I will drop a link in the description to a video on how to access your SQLITE database, to read it. There's an app you can use to read your SQLITE database file. So I'm in that file now that I can use to read my SQLITE database file. And this is where my database is. So once I create the cities database, it's going to reflect here. So now let's go back and run the code. And once we run the code, we'll come back to check this practice DB database and we'll see our table cities displayed there. So we run our query. Now we are connected to our SQLITE database. Okay, our result has displayed 247 rows by 3 columns. The first column, which is this column 0, is the ID column. The second one is the name. Why the third one is the population. So I've seen that our code has run successfully. So let's go back to our SQLITE database to see our results. So now we are in our SQLITE database reader. So let's open our database. So you can see cities is displayed. We can see ID, name, population, and we saw the first name and the population. So we can see this is successful. Now we are going to try something. We are going to remove a query in our code to see the effect on our result. Before we see what removing that query will do, let's delete this our cities table so that we will not have the error saying the table already exists. So now we'll go to our query. So now what we want to remove from this query is this skip first row so that you can see the effect on the code. So now let's run this code again without this line of query. So we run the code. It's connected to the database. So let's see our result. You can see the first row says name, population is part of the record, which is not right. So let's go to our SQL database and see the result. So we click on it. You can see our cities. You can see number of rows 275. You can see row 1 name, population. So that is why we had to include that line of code so I can delete this header so that the header will not be duplicated. So we go back to our code and we uncomment it so that our results can be accurate. So once you run this, you will not see that the header will be removed and everything will be accurate and well read.